So this is a flashback to when I was a child. It happened when I was around 5 or 6 years old, and I was in the car with my mother, my aunt, and my 2 older brothers. I'm not sure if I was half asleep or in a super perceptive state, but I knew something was about to happen. It was late night, and I remember my mother and aunt in the front seat singing. We had been driving for what seemed like forever, and both my brothers had fallen asleep at this point, but my aunt kept me awake so that I could sing with them. I remember there was a Christmas song playing on the radio, and we were all too caught up in merry times to notice anything around us. All of a sudden, the car got really cold, and it started raining really hard. Outside the car, I could hear sirens from some fire engines that were racing past us, going in the same direction that we were heading. My mother stopped to be nosy, of course, and I wish she hadn't. It was horrible. An entire building was on fire, and you could hear screams coming from inside it as the fire department tried to put out the flames. It was the worst thing I had ever witnessed. But the strange thing was that it was almost like the world or some power was trying to stop this fire with the rain, like as if it knew it was wrong. My mother, who was driving, decided that we didn't need to stay around to see the result of the fire department putting out the fire, and that's when it happened. I saw it. It appeared at first to be a cat, like a normal house cat, but at the same time I could feel that it was nowhere near normal. It was standing on all fours on our back window, looking back in the direction of the fire that we were now driving away from, and you could see a very big, evil smile on its face. Then it turned and looked at me, and its smile grew more sinister. This normal house cat then completely engulfed itself in fire. The fire had the almost beautiful red, orange and yellow colours I'd ever seen, and most likely ever will see again. It was almost demonic in the way it was drawing me in. After staring into our car for what seemed like an eternity, with me frozen in fear, the cat, engulfed in flames, slowly makes its way to the top of our car, leaving behind paw prints of soot that were not being washed away by the rain. You could literally hear it on the roof, its claws scratching against the metal as it takes every step. My aunt took notice to the sounds on the roof and asked, "What's that noise?" To that I reply, "A demon is on top of the car." It must have sounded so absurd to the adults, because they burst out laughing at what I had said. The noise on the roof stopped after the laughter erupted from the front seat, so I looked out of the back window for the rest of the ride, hoping to see this hellcat emerge once again, but it didn't. My brothers slept throughout the entire ordeal, and once we'd reached our destination and all exited the vehicle, my mother noticed the paw prints on the back window and said, "I wonder how those got there." To her I replied, "The firecat did it." I was never believed, and I still haven't found answers to what I saw. For a long time I was afraid of cats because of this, and only now, this year is the first year out of my entire life that I ever came close to a cat. Funny thing is though, as I always say to my wife, to me our cat smells like something that's been burning for a long time. No one in the house smells it except for me. I bought a new home on the 1st of July. It was a rental and pretty run down, but with lots of effort and quite a bit of cash, the house is now wonderful, and we moved in last weekend. There are 4 of us living there, and no one has ever been in the house alone for any great length of time, so we've not heard any strange noises, at least until last night. The start of the weirdness began when 2 of us went out onto the deck to have a smoke. We were chatting away when the light outside began to flicker on and off. Probably just a short with the bulb. I'll change it later, I said, and it stopped flickering. Then I didn't think anything more about it. The house went to bed except for my son and his friend who stayed up playing games. A couple of hours later I woke up and my light was on. I thought it was weird, but thought nothing of it. I got up and had a pee, turned off the light, got back into bed and went to sleep. A while later I was again woken up by the light in my bedroom. What the hell? I look over and think that, well, the fan is blowing, maybe it made the string touch and the light came on, as it's a touch-light ceiling fan where all you do is touch the chain instead of pull it. So I just turned the fan off, then the light, and went back to bed. Then around 3 a.m. I was again woken up by the light. I'm really mad now, so I go into the living room and ask my son and his friend if they were coming into my room and turning the light on. My son was fast asleep, but his friend said that no, they haven't been into my room at all, but that they'd heard me earlier saying hello to someone and then the light came on. I told him it definitely wasn't me, but he said that they'd heard it so clearly that they both had to check their phones to confirm they hadn't butt dialed someone. The next morning, when we were getting ready to leave for work, my daughter told me that last night, while she was in her room working on her art project, that her lamp turned on and off several times. Does anyone have any ideas? This incident occurred during the time I resided in my parents' second house, which they inherited from my grandfather. It was along the Route 1 in California. Though originally from the UK, I was raised on the East Coast. I had a serious relationship fallout at the end of last summer, so I decided to take some time off my routine and run away to this secluded place all the way across the country. My parents' house is very isolated, with its own fencing perimeter. The reason I had taken this break against the wishes of my parents was because I felt that I really needed to get myself together, and the best way to do so was by isolating myself from people. During my time there, I'd wake up in the morning, make myself coffee, read books and go for walks. That's pretty much it. I had almost gone on a social media detox. I love sunsets, so whenever I'm in California, I tried to make the most of those beautiful moments. There was a place a few minutes' drive from the house that I used to visit when I was a kid and watch the sun go down. This had become my evening routine after dinner, and sometimes I stayed after twilight reading books, sometimes almost an hour after the sunset. The time I left was determined by the emotions at the time. One evening when I was driving back and it had become dark, suddenly I saw a woman wearing white jackets and walking along the road ahead. I switched to my high beam to get a better look at her, but she kept on walking, unnoticing of the great white light that shone on her. I decided to pass her slowly, leaning my steering gradually towards the left so that there would be a comfortable distance between my car and her. She kept walking along the street as if I wasn't there, and as I passed her I could see in the reflections of my rear lights that she was quite old, maybe in her 70s or 80s. I soon reached home and the encounter escaped my mind. The next and following day, the same thing happened. I saw the woman walking along the road. After seeing her multiple times, I was pretty sure she must just be a local, and she was just having a regular evening walk. But what strangely stuck with me was that the road had no streetlights, so it's really dangerous to be walking along that road, and especially at that time of day, since the speed limit for the road is set to 45 miles an hour, and it's pitch black out there. No sane person would do that. However, another day I was returning back home as usual, and something else occurred to me like a bolt of lightning, and that is that I would always see her on the same part of the road. Now that struck me as very odd, but then the next day I decided to leave for home earlier than usual, when the light from the sun was still setting, and I wondered if I could catch a glimpse of her during the day. Unfortunately, though, I didn't see her, so that instantly dissolved my theory. A couple of days went by and I left for home almost 30 minutes past dark, since I'd gotten lost in the sounds of the waves splashing across the massive coastline rocks. During the drive I saw her, and guess what? It was the exact same spot, the exact same sweater, and that gentle walk along the road, even though it was a different time. It actually creeped me out this time. I swear to God that day, in that moment, I was afraid. The dark had never bothered me before, and that place always felt safe to me. But this woman in this spot that I had seen so many times actually terrified me that day. I went past her this time as fast as I could and never looked back. I parked my car inside the garage and made sure that I secured the lock on the perimeter gates, and as soon as I got home, bolted the doors and also checked if the security camera at the front porch was working okay. Only when things looked good to me, I felt a bit at ease. I told my mum about it the next day, but her outlook towards it was as expected, casual, and that I shouldn't worry about it and make sure that I get back home before it's dark. And that's what I did ever since. The next afternoon I scanned the whole road in my car, wondering if there were any grave spots or plaques of somebody who had passed away there, but there was nothing at all along the road. I even did a web search to see if anything had happened on that street in the past, but I was unable to find anything related to it. After that incident, I made sure that I would get back home before sunset during my time there. I never saw her again after that day, and eventually within a few weeks I returned back to the East Coast and forgot all about it. I haven't been to the house since the pandemic hit, but I really felt that I should share this story with the community. I just want to say that I'm not saying that it was a ghost, but what freaks me out the most is that I have absolutely no idea why I saw her at the exact same spot every time, and with no houses in sight. Sometimes I wish I would have done a little more investigating, but I believe the circumstances in my life during that time ceased my efforts. However, I will revert back on this thread, as at the end of this coming September I'm going to be visiting the house again, and I will definitely try to investigate a little further. This happened about a month ago. Just so you know, my husband and kids were at home at the time, but not in the same room as me. I was standing in my kitchen cleaning up when I noticed some water leaking out from under the sink. I squatted down to check it, reached in to see where exactly the water was coming from, and as I pulled my arm out, I felt this sharp searing pain on my shoulder. It hurt really bad, so I went to the bathroom just to see if I could see anything. Thinking there wouldn't be anything there, I kid you not, I could clearly see 3 scratch marks on my left shoulder. I instantly started feeling scared, but didn't want anyone to know. So I went back to the kitchen, went back to the sink, squatted back down again, and repeated all of my motions, thinking maybe I'd scratched it on the cabinet door. But there is absolutely no way that it could have happened that way. I'm trying to be logical about it all, but I can't. There's no way it was the cabinet. I stood up, and this was probably stupid, but I yelled out, "You're not welcome here. Your energy is smothering. Leave." I have had other encounters before, but never to the point that I was physically hurt. So this really freaked me out, and I needed them, or whoever it was, to know that I wasn't afraid, and I wasn't going to allow it to happen in my house. My oldest son heard me and got scared. Then he saw the marks. My husband is convinced it was the cat, but I know better. If anyone has any thoughts or insight as to what might have happened, or what it could have been, please comment. I do know that I was in a bad place mentally and emotionally at the time, so I feel like my bad energy had allowed whatever it was to contact me. So my mom thought it was a great idea to get the chimney replaced before the winter months started. I was a teen at the time, maybe 15 or 16. The builders came, did their job downstairs, and lit a fire to check if it was all working okay. But it wasn't. Suddenly they were all around me, breaking my walls with a hammer, and black smoke started ruining everything I had. My clothes, my computer, my bed, some stuffed animals, my books and my backpack. But most of all the white walls. My mum and I started running like hysterical chickens trying to save my stuff, and we managed to salvage almost everything. My walls stayed black and dirty for almost half a year though, since it was starting to get colder and the job would be really hard. We did try to clean without painting and getting all the furniture out, but it didn't help much. From that day on, my room started being more and more creepy than it already was. I've always had really weird experiences there, but this time it felt heavier. Before that, there was something clearly wrong with my computer, but it just got unbearable. The thing is, whenever I went into my room or woke up, the computer would immediately turn on, not even 3 seconds later. I figured I would just once come inside my room or wake up and the computer would already be on, or wouldn't turn on. I also checked for little FBI dudes spying on my system, so I unplugged mics and cameras and mostly did everything I could to break any signals from my room to the computer. I don't know how to explain it, but it felt like my consciousness affected the machine. Like, the second I was awake, someone turned it on to beg for my attention. Eventually I got sick of it. The room was scary, the ambience was horrible, and the computer drove me nuts. One night I was feeling scared, but mostly angry, and the second I got into my room and sat in the bed, the computer turned on. At this point I got really mad. In a previous post I'd explained why I can't sleep with my back to the room or my ears uncovered, but I was going to fight all of these childish issues this time. I stood up, walked straight to the computer, turned everything off, including the screen, and waited for it to stop finishing process. I was like, "That's it, I'm done with you, stupid light monster. I'm going to sleep like a baby and you're not going to stop me." So I checked everything was off and laid down with my back towards the room. The second my face touched the pillow, the computer lit up. I ran for my life and didn't sleep there for the winter. I threw that stupid computer away. I was co-creator at that time of one of the most popular teams in the USA at one point, and our team was contacted by the Discovery Channel networks to possibly do a television show. We turned down the offer though, reason being because we didn't want that type of national attention for a service we provided for free, and they were under the impression that the possibility was very high that we would be asked to dramatize, to the point that the stories could be made to appear we were untrustworthy. As a lot of teams doing shows at that time wound up caving in to that pressure. I do have 2 stories published in the Encyclopedia of Haunted Places, compiled by Jeff Ballinger, and feature on a DVD titled The Haunted South. The stories in the book can be found on Google, on What, When, How. Search for the old Tallapoosa Jail and the Devil's Kitchen, Tallapoosa, Georgia. We were a Christian-based team, trying to use evidence collected to prove that there is a spiritual realm that is just as real as the physical realm. We also made that aspect of the team known to anyone that requested our services. We had an apostolic minister as our team chaplain and had prayer before and after every investigation. We required every team member to have the same basic Christian principles as we did. Now, this particular investigation, in June 2001, and what had contributed to the cessation of investigations of our team, there was a possible malevolent spirit. A family had contacted us because of increasing violent behavior of this spirit, to the point that physical injuries were being inflicted on the residents. We saw this as a true need for intervention for this family. The family were rather deceptive about our initial questions to what possibly allowed an evil entity to wreak havoc on them and their home. They'd failed to mention that they had been having frequent seances and Ouija sessions and using provocation to try and get this spirit to interact with them. We arrived at the residence and had prayer with the team and the family before anything else was started. I immediately felt very uneasy when I approached the front door, as I have always been very sensitive to the presence of spirits, and this feeling was almost like a brick wall of energy at their front door. It was very apparent that there had been other activities conducted by the family than we were advised. We questioned them further, and were then told about the seances and Ouija use. We scolded them for providing misleading information to us, and the use of activities that could open the door to allow spirits to enter, and that this would be the means to their issues. They did have neighbours a few houses away that had experienced, when described, residual-type hauntings. The area being investigated was in the Devil's Kitchen district, close to the old Hungarian monk monastery and across the street from Budapest Cemetery, where we had recorded several Class A EVPs in the past. We set up our equipment that consisted of 3 static night vision video cameras, handheld video cameras, 2 static digital recorders, 2 handheld recorders, digital IR thermometers, 2 Canon Rebel digital cameras, and 2 EMF detectors. We immediately had strong EMF readings and temperature drops in areas of high activity. The areas just happened to be around the coffee table and the kitchen table, where the seances and Ouija sessions had occurred, and the master bedroom. We left static recorders in the master bedroom and their laundry room. Both those areas were checked, closed and recorded on video to ensure no tampering of the recorders would take place, as the physical contact from the spirits had taken place in the bedrooms. There was no audible EVPs on the handheld recorders or video evidence seen on the handheld cameras. Just before completion of the investigation, we had prayer with the family and cleansed the residents by rebuking the spirits from the home. The prayer seemed to have worked, as it was like a weight had been lifted off the residents almost immediately. We discouraged them to stop opening doors to a realm they had no control over, as they were having no activity in their home prior to their activities to contact spirits. This made it apparent that they had unknowingly invited this entity into their home. Upon review of the remaining digital recorders the next afternoon, there was a Class A EVP that needed no enhancement to be heard whatsoever. It was as clear as 2 people talking right over the recorder. I still have the EVP but will not play it in my home, especially after the events that happened to me when I was in bed and getting relaxed to get some sleep. The EVP was clearly 2 distinct types of phenomena. The capture occurred when we were having prayer with the family. You can hear the minister praying, muffled by the closed door to the master bedroom, and us on the opposite end of the residence. The first aspect of the EVP was a clear voice that said, "Earth warrior, depart now." And the second aspect was a pain and fear-filled scream with no voice component to that capture. We used a program called Audacity to clean, amplify, speed, slow or even reverse the recordings to clarify the sound capture on the recorders if it was needed. Yes, I have captured EVPs that have to be played backwards to hear what was recorded on several occasions. So I was lying in bed on my left side when the room became very cold. My wife, a pretty big girl that sleeps with very little cover over her, pulled the comforter over herself and went to sleep. I heard 3 distinct voices in my right ear, and the voices were that of my father, who had passed in 1986, my grandfather, this was prior to my son's birth, and its voice, followed by laughter. I know it wasn't a dream or sleep paralysis, as I had only been in bed for about 5 minutes when this occurred. This incident led to an oppressive entity inhabiting our home for about 6 months before we were able to cast it out. It caused so much turmoil in our home that it almost led to divorce between my wife and I. It caused me to slip into a deep state of depression and my wife into a quick-to-anger rage, as well as her use of demeaning and intentionally severely hurtful comments. This was very unlike her, as she had always been so calm, cool and collected about any situation, with her being a devout Christian and RN. I was still a paramedic at the time, and never had depression of any sort, but this spirit nearly tore our household apart. I, nor any other team member, was able to capture another EVP of this demonic entity. It had never physically harmed us, nor had the ability to possess us due to our deep faith in Christ, but the oppression was near unbearable. The demon was finally cast out and life returned to normal almost immediately. I promised my wife that I would formally disband the team and never do another investigation. This was not due to a lack of faith in God, but a promise made to God and her to never do investigations again. I came across and watched a YouTube video whilst going through posts on here of people sharing their experiences, so I wanted to share mine. For most of my life, I've lived in this house with my mother, grandpa, brother and uncle. This house is over 200 years old, and my great-grandparents lived here and died here. It's an old farmhouse, but the farm itself hasn't been functioning for a long time. Supposedly someone fell off the barn while building it and died instantly. There are at least 3 deaths that are known on this property. To explain the house layout, walking into the porch, it goes straight into the kitchen. Then that leads into the dining room, and from there on your right you can go into the bathroom. Passing that and straight on is the living room, and from there is a door into the back corner that's a bedroom. Back from the living room on the right is a door that leads to a hallway that has steps and a basement door. The upstairs has 3 bedrooms and is pretty complicated, but this will give you a mental picture and will help me tell the story better. So unusually, my uncle is only 2 years older than me. My brother is 4 years younger than me, and we all shared a bedroom because of how scared we could always get. My uncle and I would stay up late playing video games, and we'd always hear noises, like someone walking around, but there would be no one there. So the room we stayed in had some steps that led straight up to a room on the right, and if you turned left it led to a smaller hallway. At the end was another room that had some more steps that led to a room on the right. This was the storage room, and it was full of stuff. It always had a weird vibe, and it had a hook lock because it wouldn't stay shut and never sat in the frame correctly. So this one particular night we were playing video games. We had our bedroom door open. My grandpa and mum were both at work, as they usually worked until around 7 a.m. They both worked the same shift, and it sucked because we were at home alone all night. It was about 2 a.m. and we could hear the usual walking and knocking noises. We were trying to ignore it all until we heard something unusual. It was the hook lock on the storage room. It was jiggling. We stopped what we were doing and turned around in its direction. We watched for a while before it started to slowly open, as it made the classic door squeak sound. This door was locked from the outside. We could see nothing in there, just darkness, when suddenly a white face appeared. It looked like someone wearing a mask, as it had black holes for eyes. It was just kind of staring at us. We were now freaking out. We had 3 beds that were all directly next to each other on the floor, and my brother was sleeping on the middle one. We hid in the corner and left him asleep. We were too scared to save him if we had to. We stayed there for a while, completely freaking out, but just as fast as it appeared, it was gone. Even after it had gone, we stayed where we were, too scared to move, but eventually we gained enough courage to move to the door and turn the light on, out by the stairs. Though what really motivated us to move was the fact that we really had to go to the bathroom. It was downstairs, so we flew down there, did our business and flew back up, all the while fearing being grabbed by something at the bottom where there were holes around the railings. We thought someone would trip us up, because people always fall down or slip on the 3 steps from the top where the railing begins. This was only one of my experiences. We don't live there anymore, except for my grandpa, and last winter the house was set on fire in the upstairs where my brother and uncle and I slept. Just that room, which is really scary. My grandpa is now moving out and has converted the dining room into a bedroom because the other parts of the house, except that half that took water damage from the fire department, isn't in too bad of a condition but is slowly getting worse. His main reason for moving though is because the strange activity has picked up more than ever. We set up cameras and we got a clip of the upstairs door handle moving on its own, which is the best evidence we have at the moment. We also picked up footage of tons of orbs, at least 2 a night. This is all a true story, and nothing was exaggerated or changed. All my life, my mum has always unwillingly been a magnet for paranormal activity though she never spoke of it, as she thought of it as a curse that plagued her. Once, at around 2 a.m, I found her sitting at the dining room table, sitting stock still, smoking cigarette after cigarette, and staring into the living room with all the lights off. The cigarette smoke was settling at about the halfway point in the room, so it looked like a low stagnant cloud, adding to the suddenly alarming feel of the space. I called out to her, but she didn't respond. She just sat there, the ember of her Marlboro brightening with every drag. As you could hear the crisp sound of the burning tobacco as she inhaled, I just stood there, arms crossed, chilled from the night air, and looking at her in confusion. Mum, are you okay?" She just sat there, silent, stoic, staring at nothing. Another drag, and then finally she'd said something. "They just walk through. They just walk through here. I don't know where they're going." I scanned the room, goosebumps shivering up my arms. "Who, Mum?" I asked. Nothing. I was young and fairly creeped out, so I just backed up slowly and quietly went back to bed, closing and locking my bedroom door. The next morning I asked her what it was all about, and she acted like it was nothing, like I'd had some bad dream and thought it was real. She completely played it off like I was crazy to think she would do something like that. "Oh, and by the way, you know I quit smoking 6 months ago." Stuff like that happened all the time. Little incidents that she was a part of but would never acknowledge once they'd happened. I know she had some gift or power or something, but she never actually told me about it. I think because she hoped whatever it was wouldn't find an attachment to her sons. But it did. It was my first year back from college. I was asleep in my bed with only my brief son. The morning sunlight was streaming into my room, waking me from my dreams. It was warm and bright, and I can still feel the way the sun felt on my skin that morning as I lay on my stomach, blankets thrown by the vigorous sleeper I was. The day was going to be beautiful, and I was thinking about what I'd do first after breakfast. I was facing the wall opposite the doorway of my room, staring at the Cocoon movie poster I loved so much, when I heard my bedroom door creak. Was it Mum checking on me before she headed to work? No. Suddenly something felt off. I could hear the door opening, as I knew the sound of that door as well as I knew every creak and groan of this house that I grew up in, and I knew what it sounded like when it was opened all the way. But it didn't open all the way. It stopped suddenly. It was like the minute I felt something was off, the door just stopped opening. Then like lightning, a wave of terror rushed through my body, washing through me like an icy wave of water. I was instantly awake and was paralyzed in fear. Completely paralyzed. It wasn't my mum, and I knew it. I couldn't move. I couldn't yell. I just lay there completely terrified. Then whatever it was started moving towards me. I could hear the steps on the carpet. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst. I was so scared, tears started streaming from my eyes. I could feel the presence stop, hovering over me and looking down. I kept praying it wouldn't touch me. Please don't touch me. I could feel it reaching out, its arm extending, moving to rest a hand on the small of my back. I managed to close my eyes and decided I wasn't going to let this happen. I was going to count to 3 and gather all my strength and jump up and scream. I was going to break this paralysis. As I made this decision, I felt the arm stop. It stopped right over my body and I felt it freeze. So I gathered all my energy and I tried to count to 3 and move, but I was still so scared, nothing happened. I barely moved an inch. I closed my eyes again and focused harder than I had ever focused in my life, and managed to roll myself off the bed and squeak out a meagre yelp. It was enough though. I hit the ground hard, breathing heavily and sweating from either fear or the suddenly hot sunlight streaming through my window. My bedroom door was closed, and now there was nothing around me. The presence was gone. I threw open the door and ran up the stairs to the living room where my mum was getting ready to go to work. "Oh, you're up. I was just about to go down there and say good morning," she said, bright and cheery. "You weren't just in my room, checking on me or something?" Wiping sweat from my forehead, completely confused. She gave me an odd look. "No, for God's sake, put some clothes on. I'll see you tonight." And she was gone. That was the first time something like this had ever happened. Since then it followed me everywhere I went. I don't feel it all the time, and sometimes years go by, but it always comes back. I don't know if I will ever find out what it is. My mum passed away 2 years ago, and with her gone I can only hope she tries to protect me from whatever it is that is haunting me. This isn't the only experience I've had either. It's just one that profoundly affected me. At first I thought it was a sleep issue, but the problem with that theory is that I was awake the whole time. I remember seeing the wall, the poster, the bright room, feeling the sheets underneath me, the smell of the fabric softener. I'm no fool. The first thought I had was that it was a dream, but I was going through the logic of what was happening to me and knew it wasn't. That, coupled with our family's history, my mum's experiences, my experiences, I knew something was happening. We travelled everywhere all over the world, and I think we must have picked something up somewhere, and I think my mum knew it. This wasn't the first thing that's happened, but it was the biggest. So I'm not sure what this is, or what to call this, or how to even really get into it. I'll try to make this quick, please bear with me. This has been happening for pretty much as long as I can remember. My parents even recall a few similar instances when I was very young. I've noticed that I get them, no matter if I'm walking somewhere, driving somewhere, or even out getting something to eat. Sometimes they're more these intense feelings than actual images, but sometimes they're so specific I can't shake them off as just a coincidence. Side note, please don't bring up mental health. I was diagnosed by a medical professional with PTSD when I was 18. I was also diagnosed with major depression and anxiety when I was 13. I know for a fact that what I'm dealing with is something else. I know the difference between PTSD flashbacks and symptoms versus whatever this is. Reliving my trauma is different than having a 15-30-second flashes of what people saw, felt, and how they died, and so on. I'm going to tell you about 2 of these instances. They can last anywhere from 15 to 30 seconds, and when I get these flashes or images or visions, whatever you want to call them, sometimes I'm the person, or at least I'm in their body. I see what they see, hear what they hear, and feel what they feel. Sometimes it's like watching a movie. I see them up close, and other times from far away. Other times there are these really specific flashes of how someone felt, what they saw and what they looked like, and what they smelt like, etc. The first one I'm going to tell you about was sometime in 2011. I was living in my old house in Bellevue, about 16-minute drive from the Seattle, Washington. My mom and I were heading to the mall to meet my family for a birthday dinner. I was pretty bummed that I was going to be the only kid at dinner, but it wasn't unusual. I was also looking forward to eating a fancy dinner and dessert. The restaurant felt enriched with history, but also had a very heavy atmosphere. But overall, the restaurant was quite beautiful. It had dark wood interiors and was filled with historical photos and paintings. It had chandeliers and fancy white tablecloths, the works. After we'd eaten our dinner, I was looking in the direction of the bar, sort of zoning out and not really being present while the adults were speaking. All of a sudden I get another one of these flashes. I can see an older, middle-aged man. He was sitting at a table and he was choking. I specifically remember seeing some bones on his plate. Maybe fish, and the restaurant was a lot more empty in my vision. I remember feeling panicked as I was watching this man choke to death. No one seemed to notice or care. I heard the sound of ice hitting water in a glass and felt a sharp sensation in my throat. It eventually passed about 25 seconds later. It was definitely one of my longer ones. I remember telling my mum about it shortly after. I'm usually very straightforward with her when it comes to these experiences. After I had spoken with her, my mum then went and talked to the bartender and asked if anyone had died in the restaurant. He went on to tell her about a customer who'd choked to death as he pointed at the same table I was looking at. As we headed out the restaurant, my mum told me what the bartender had said. I'll never forget it. The second experience was sometime in the fall of 2018, and I was sleeping over at my friend's house. There was 4 of us, and we were all squished in my friend's car. We were driving to buy my first bong, and I was really excited. I was sitting in the back seat, squashed up against the window. We were driving alongside a river, and it was getting dark out, and I remember staring outside the window and looking into the water, whilst my friends listened to music and sang along. I'd zoned out again and felt disconnected from the present. In this flash, all of a sudden, I feel like I'm in the water. I can feel it on my skin, in my hair and in my lungs. It's all I could think about. It's all I could hear. I was drowning. I also clearly remember feeling an intense throbbing pain in my skull, then was taking deep breaths and coming back to. I've never experienced this in front of them before, but I felt very compelled to tell them what had just happened to me, and I trusted them, so I told them what I saw and what I felt. Shortly after, my friends turned the music down, and they all kind of looked at each other for a second, stunned. My friend then goes on to tell me that their sister's best friend had died about half a year prior, in that exact river. He'd hit his head and drowned. That was sort of my final confirmation of many similar experiences, that what I'm dealing with is real. I'm wondering if anyone knows what this is, or is experienced it, or something similar. Hey fearsome friends, thanks for listening. Please make sure you subscribe and click that notification button so you can be aware of my videos when they upload. If you have a story that you'd like to hear me record, then please send it to my subreddit rmissfearsome83, or alternatively email me at missfearsome83@hotmail.com. If you'd also like to support me further, please go to my Patreon, where you can join for as little as $1 a month, where you'll get early access to all my recordings, and they will also be available as MP3 downloads. I also have some great merch on the Teespring website. All links are in the description below. Stay safe, stay happy, and remember, keep being creepy.